I'm Gayatri Kandarai. I'm with the Association for Progressive Communications. For the rest of the session, I'll try and moderate this session. It's a really interesting time as such, because the internet has, there's this belief that the internet has fundamentally changed how we live our lives and experience most of the things that we're used to experiencing. During this session, we'll try and look at that assumption, and if that assumption is true, then we'll try and look at the different things that matter to us on the internet and see how we can evaluate and assess those things that matter to us to ensure that we have an open and free and a universal internet as such. And we have a wonderful panel here of people who work with different areas. We'll start with Mr. Joseph Kenetachi. He's the UN Special Rapporteur for Privacy. We have Ms. Gayatri Venkateswaran, who is the former Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance. We have Ms. Constance Baumler, yes, from ISOC. And we have Guy Berger, who's the Director of Freedom of Expression in UNESCO. And we have Måns Pickler, who's with IPDC. We're going to start with Guy and then move forward. Just a few announcements is that we were going to try and do the session a little differently. At the end of the session, we know, at least after the first round of discussions, it's not so much of question and answer that we're trying to look at. It's really we want to get a feedback from you on what kind of an internet do you envisage for yourself? What kind of an internet would seem right to you? And for you to propose those particular aspects that you want looked at when we are studying the internet universality principles as such, right? We have a colleague there who's going to take notes and try and keep track of the entire discussion. So please identify yourself and where you're from, and let's try and speak as slowly, including myself, as possible, so that we can try and get all this on record. So we'll start with Guy. Guy, would you like to give us some sort of a sense of why you want to study this idea of internet universality, what you've done so far, but more importantly, what is it that you want to get done in going ahead?
Thank you so much, Gayatri, and welcome everybody. So this is a World Press Freedom Day conference. It's not an internet conference, but it's very important, of course, to discuss press freedom in relation to the internet, because once upon a time, the media was an ecosystem on its own, more or less, and now the media is very much more part of a much bigger ecosystem of the internet. And so what happens on the internet is really important for journalism. So UNESCO has developed a bigger picture for the internet, which has got a lot of relevance to press freedom and for the question of journalism. So UNESCO is having a series of consultations around the world. And actually we have engaged APC, the Association of Progressive Communications, which Gayatri is a member of, to help us with these consultations, because we really want to hear from people about these issues. So I'll explain very briefly too. UNESCO has this concept called internet universality. It's not difficult. It sounds complex, but I'll explain it very simply. And then we want indicators, and I'll explain why we want indicators on that. So if we move to the second slide, please. So I think you probably know UNESCO is an intergovernmental body in the UN system. We have, guess how many member states? Anybody know how many countries are members of UNESCO? We know Indonesia, of course. That's one. Let's start counting. Okay, there's 195 governments at UNESCO. So it's quite a big organization, and it's difficult to get 195 governments to agree, and then also difficult to get all of them to implement what they agree on, because sometimes they agree and they don't implement. Anyway, it's still a very important organization, as you can see from this conference. So in UNESCO, we had a whole series of meetings around the world and research that led to a conference called Connecting the Dots, and you can see that on the screen here. This was 2 years ago, and Connecting the Dots was, of course, for the internet dots, .org, .com, and so on and so forth. And the idea was to try and develop a position for UNESCO, because the internet is raising so many issues of privacy, of surveillance, of e-commerce, of digital protection of sources of journalists and so on. So we had this big conference. We came with an outcome document. You'll see here there's also a little thing that says IPDC Media Development Indicators. Now my colleague here will speak more about what is this IPDC and where does this fit into the picture of UNESCO developing its position on the internet. Anyway, coming out of this, this conference, the Connect the Dots, UNESCO adopted a position called Internet Universality. I explained what it means. And the question is, it's a very nice position. It's really, it's beautiful ideas. The question is, how do you give these ideas some legs so they can actually make a difference? And one way is to try and measure how, on the ground, these principles of Internet Universality are being respected or not respected, and what can be done to improve what's happening to meet these high standards of Internet Universality. Okay, let's have the next slide, please. So we want to have these Internet indicators that will help everybody understand in a society if we map the Internet, what are the key things we want to map and know about. And then secondly, not just to have knowledge for knowledge's sake, but also to use that knowledge to have discussions between Facebook, government, teachers, parliamentarians, civil society, journalists, and so on. Have policy-based discussions based on evidence, hard information that we've generated from these indicators, from research on these indicators. And then, if in this process we get these indicators that are approved by UNESCO members, then they become standards. In other words, not just nice principles, they become international standards. International standard is quite strong. It's not a compulsory thing, but it just means it carries a lot more weight. And you'll hear a bit more about that shortly. So this is what Internet Universality means. And this is what we want to measure with Internet Universality. It's very easy to see ROAM. And actually, I have a little revelation to make. My colleague here from the Internet Society, Constance Bomela, was seconded to UNESCO by the Internet Society, and she helped us develop this model. It's very simple, it's easy to understand. Remember, ROAM. This is what we see as the most important things on the Internet. We want an Internet that's respecting rights, that's open, that's accessible, and has multi-stakeholder participation in the key decisions that shape the Internet. So, moving on to the next slide. This is, for example, now when you're looking at the Internet, you would say category number 1, how would we assess press freedom on the Internet in a country? What indicators would you look at? Would you look at the right to publish? Would you look at protection of sources? Would you look at whatever? And there's lots of rights. There's privacy, of course. There's rights to culture. There's rights to language. Which rights should we look at? And how do we actually make it possible to measure them? Openness. For example, you know Wikipedia. Wikipedia is an open information resource. So what is the state of openness and availability as opposed to closed? And that's just one. There's much else in openness. Constance will speak more about that. Accessibility. How accessible is the Internet in terms of being multilingual? And many other questions as well. Multi-stakeholder means how would we measure, is there participation in policy making on the Internet? And the last one is cross-cutting indicators, such as, it's different for children, it's different to children and adults, children and youth, between men and women, and so those are other indicators. So I'm almost going to wrap up now. So we're having all these consultations around the world, and this is the first one since we worked with APC to decide on this process. We're going to try and get data, your views, your comments, your opinions, and then also we want to try and get hard statistics where possible, not always possible. We want to be gender sensitive and child sensitive, and we're going to have a pre-test of the indicators in some countries once we get them ready near the end of the year. Next year, we want to pilot these indicators. So we'll choose a country in conjunction with interested groups, say like, for argument's sake, people are interested in Indonesia. So, okay, let's apply these indicators in Indonesia. Let's make the research here and see what kind of results can come out of that. So these are just some of the challenges. Universality of the indicators. That means very different countries. How can we have indicators that you can use in Bhutan and you can use in the USA. Okay? Maybe they're not all applicable everywhere, but we need something that's, because UNESCO is a universal organization. We want the internet to be universal. So our indicators we should have ROAM, we want this universally. Then we have the national and the global dimensions. As you know, there's much stuff that is not in the national space. So how will you try and get changes to improve stuff that's outside of the national space, which is impacting? Maybe this middle one is the most important one, a workable number of key indicators, because we can have a wish list of 1,000 indicators of what's important. And then you can never move with so many indicators. And then we also have to figure out, well, what if there's not data? How would we go about collecting that data? I mean, or how generating data? Can you use focus groups if you don't have national statistics? What if the data is kept by the companies and they won't share it with this process? Finally, there's a question. This is not just research for research's sake, but because you want to have recommendations coming out of it, and a whole process where people can improve how the rights, openness, accessibility, multi-stakeholder be on their thing. So this is the face-to-face consultation. We will, in about 2 months' time, have an online platform that we'll try and get feedback from. So that's it. From me, that's to introduce the whole enterprise. We're very pleased and honored that you're part of this. And we will take careful notes, so all your ideas are very useful. And eventually we'll feed all these into the development of the indicators, and we'll present them to the member states at UNESCO for consideration for approval.
Thanks, Guy. I'm glad you pointed out the need to have a workable set of indicators, and we're still hoping that at the end of this session we try and come out with a few, even if it's not fully fleshed out indicators, we at least get an idea of what it is that we want to study. And the three speakers will particularly look at and propose some of those indicators. But Mr. Mons, can we go to you for a few minutes now and try and get a sense of this committee that's been driving this initiative, but also to hear from you, what is it that you want, how do you envisage this whole thing unraveling as such?
Is it function here? What's the other? Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, I'm Mogens Bjergård. I'm the Danish member of IPDC, the international program for the development of communication. I just want to say, just after you asked for a workable number of indicators, that shouldn't make you be silent about all your ideas, because I think we need all ideas now, and then we have to find the number that we have to use. So please come up with all your ideas. The IPDC is the international program for the development of communication. It was originally made to promote development in less developed countries, and it is an intergovernmental forum elected by the UNESCO General Conference, and it is to promote the development in the yes, it said communication, but it is for media development, for safety of journalists, for so we can have a pluralistic and sustainable media, and as I said, in least developed countries, that was the idea from the beginning. The members of the council are in general experts in the media field. I'm one of them. I'm a journalist myself. I'm a freelance. I'm also president of the European Federation of Journalists, engaged in developing organizations and in media freedom. And as members in the IPDC, we are all committed to the overall program of UNESCO. So we are not there for some organizations or some country, but we are for the overall organization. The media development activities governed by the Council includes, one of our main activities is to grant support for media development projects from outside actors. This is one of our fundamental activities. And then indicators on safety of journalists. Each time a journalist is killed, the Director General makes a condemnation and invites the member states to take action and report back to UNESCO. As an example, my country, Denmark, sends now awareness to the embassies in the targeted countries and ask if possible to follow up on that. So there are many ways of doing this, but it's very important that we can follow up when the General Director invites member states to take action. So we can push on that. The IPDC Council in 2008 agreed on a standard for what media development means and how it can be assessed in each country. This is in the form of the media development indicators. That's also indicators. And that map the extent to which a country's media system is free, pluralistic, independent and professional, has adequate infrastructure and performs democratically. So this is an example of indicators that you have got there. So just to say, to show that it's possible to have a workable number of indicators. IPDC has also catalyzed further indicators on gender and media, on media viability, safety of journalists, and not least safety on journalists. And this has served stakeholders in given countries, providing them with a foundation for evidence-based policy linked to the international standards. This interest of IPDC is not merely for media development as an end itself, but because its members agree that media development is very important for achieving UNESCO's aim. More recently, the link has been made between media development and the Sustainable Development Goals, and the Council has mandated the UNESCO Secretariat to lobby for this recognition in the SDGs, which has been partially achieved in Goal 16. I must say, as a journalist and working with media freedom, I would have loved that a much higher level for this goal. I think it's one of our absolutely fundamental goals that we have. I have a little campaign, my own little campaign, when we are talking about internet today. In the program, it says that we look to compare it with traditional media. All our children, for them, internet is the traditional media. I think it's time to recognize that we have several media platforms, and they are all equally in that respect. It's all traditional media, new media, or something coming up. We don't know about them yet, but suddenly something will appear. So I think we have to recognize that we have some platforms, internet, radio, TV, print, and then we have a lot of media in each of them. And what is missing, that's why we are talking about this today, is that we are missing more policy on the platform that where internet provides a lot of media, and a lot more media than we are used to. But this is also traditional media working on internet platform today. My children, for them, this is all their media. The only reason that they read newspapers is because I have had a subscription on a newspaper. So they see them. So therefore, of course, media on the internet platform are vital for sustainable development. So we really look forward for listening to you. I don't think I should take much more time because we need more of the panels to add on. And will come back myself also with comments and ideas when we come to that. Yes, I should say that. Yes, that's right. November next year, the results from what we are doing now about the indicators and the research and everything, that will be considered by the IPDC Council in November 2018. So we are working for this. So what your input will be used, we will take care of it, we will consider it, and put it into something that all the member states will look at that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Beckler. We'll move to Joseph Kanatachi and start with the first principle you were talking about, right? Human rights. So how do you see the space for human rights within this idea of internet universality? and more particularly privacy. What is it that you'd like to highlight? And more importantly, what is it that you'd like them to measure?
Thank you very much. Yes, I've prepared a few slides simply to be able to, there we are. We've actually, here's a little plug, we've actually, for UNESCO, just published a study on privacy, free expression and transparency, which you can download for free because UNESCO is such a great organization. But I'd like to move on to, I have very short time, 5 to 6 minutes, so I want to move on to talking about the world we live in. I want to give concrete measures that somebody can use as metrics in their society. So, and above all,